some general remarks on transatlantic relations. You know, apart from all the tensions and problematic fields that we have, not only over the past three years since this current administration has taken over, but most of the, let me put it that way, many of the topics have been around for quite a bit longer. So, but, you know, I would really make it a point to emphasize that there's much more that binds us together than divides us. So I'm not a big fan of all these, you know, sometimes very academic discussions about continental drifts, pivot to Asia, and now, you know, most recent addition to that, a failed state, meaning the United States of America, and what does that mean for us over here in the old continent? Again, there's much more that binds us together than divides us. History, values, and, you know, if you think about cultural bonds between Americans and Germans, 50 million Americans say that have, in some regard, German roots. 50 million, 50, it's about 15% of Americans say German roots. And, you know, if you look to trade and foreign direct investments, there is about 700,000 jobs that are created for German companies in the United States of America. So there's a lot of things, and not to speak of the, you know, tens of thousands of American soldiers that we still have here on German soil. That is over 30,000 GIs were stationed in Germany, and plus another about 24,000 civil servants, American civil servants here in Germany. So that is a point that cannot be denied. It's important, you know, that shows that, you know, not everything is bad. We have a lot in common that we share: values, history, and these cultural bonds of trade and economy. That will not go away overnight. But I have to admit, there have been changes over the past several years. And as I mentioned earlier, there's, you know, some of the things of these nice topics have been around for quite some while, but, you know, the perspective over the past 3 years has changed a little bit. You know, if I would name some of the topics is that are really important in the transatlantic relations, even looking past Corona crisis times, is trade. Transatlantic trade is very important. It's huge. There's a lot of trade deficit. Look from the United States side of the Atlantic. There's a big criticism by the Trump administration that they've treated unfairly because of this huge trade deficit. Another topic is NATO, a fair burden sharing. You've all heard about the 2% goal, going back to the Defense Investment Pledge in 2014. We can talk about this later. JCPOA, the Joint Cooperative Plan of Action, that is Iran, where the E3, that is Germany, Great Britain, and France, take a different position than the United States of America. Unfortunately, it's very complicated. It's a very tough issue. And Russian sanctions, where the European Union still sticks to the original path where it said, you know, sanctions upon Russia imposed because of Ukraine politics by Vladimir Putin, whereas the United States have left this path and, you know, have separate, so there's a disconnect. They have separate sanctions with regard to Russian oligarchs, for example. So there's a drift. We have, you know, I mean, at Nord Stream 2, energy diversity, LNG gas. We have the INF Treaty, WTO reform. So many things, and I could add to that some more, that play a role on the transatlantic agenda and that need to be addressed. Now and also in the future. And, you know, the nice thing is that there's still a lot of relations going on a working level. It doesn't always have to be between, you know, the chancellor herself and the U.S. president. as top leaders of our two nations, but on lower level, on mind level, and there's a lot of exchange going on. But I have also to admit, with regard to quality of interaction, it has changed. Whereas I have been meeting with representative of the administration and the Department of Defense and the Department of State and the NSC and so on. In former years, you could really rely on if you meet like top senior folks in the administration. But now it's not so sure if that is really U.S. politics. That has brought a change, but not yesterday or today, but already after this current administration took over. So it is something that we learned, and I always say we don't have to always criticize or to just complain about that. Yeah, if you are in a responsible position and you want to change things or bring things at least forward, you don't only have to address that, you have to accept reality. And the reality has changed in transatlantic relationship, like it or not. That is reality. And again, after Corona pandemic, after November 3rd, where there will be a presidential election, and by the way, a Congress election in the United States of America, these things will not go away. That we don't have the luxury to wait this out. We have to accept that and address this. And the variety, the broad, the broad scope of the transatlantic relationship, I just said with all the topics that I mentioned earlier. I have not yet mentioned, and I want to add that to this transatlantic agenda, is China. If we over here in Europe, and I'm sitting in my office in the Bundestag right now in our parliament in Berlin, we're sometimes might have the feeling that we feel squeezed between the West, that is the United States of America in the West, and China in the East. Whereas, that should not be the case. We should not allow that. It should be almost a no-brainer that we don't feel squeezed or suppressed by anybody. There is this, there was a reason why I started off by there's so much more that binds us than, puts us apart. The shared values, respect for the individual, freedom of speech, or all the freedom rights, human rights, democracy, rule of law, and all these things, intellectual property protection. These are things where we are, I think, 100% on the same side with our American friends. People sometimes forget that. And Remco, you mentioned earlier the poll by the European Council on Foreign Relations, where you said, I don't know how many percentage, but a high number of Germans said, the Russians are closer to us than the Americans. And I may add to that, there was this question a little bit earlier, I think it was last year, by Pew Research Institute, addressing exactly the same questions to Americans, asking first the Americans, what do you think about the transatlantic relations, exactly between the United States of America and the Germans? What do you think about it? Is it good or not so good? 70% of Americans said, well, they're okay, they're fine, they're actually quite good. They asked the Germans exactly the same question. What do you think about Americans? What is the relation with the Americans? 70% said that. That is something that also my transatlantic heart is bleeding, but it shows the perception of, maybe also from, geographically, obviously, the Russians are closer. And then if you look to the eastern part of Germany, they have been socialized in the former GDR for many years, several decades, and they have a different cultural connection to Poland, to Russia, or to the former Soviet Union states. That is something that has not gone away. This is still there. It is important. We have to understand that, which is sometimes difficult. I have to admit, I've never I've never visited the GDR while in the time the Berlin Wall was still up, which I regret in hindsight, but, you know, also accepting reality of facts. It's a fact, but it's different over there. And that is also something that plays into the perception of Germans of the current situation of transatlantic relations. And I'm meeting quite frequently with students, both in high school students, both in my constituency, but also when they're visiting me here in Berlin in non-corona pandemic times, because now it's not allowed. But, you know, almost every school class is asking me, you know, Americans, the evil drone wars they are leading from German soil, from Ramstein, from the air base there in Ramstein, say that is bad. And so they have access to a lot of information, right or not, correct or not correct, but they see a lot of things on the internet. They have access to that. And so I'm actually quite happy that they you know, give me this question, which I, to make it short now, you know, sometimes I say, you know, I like it much more to be protected by the American friends than threatened by Russians. And if you look, and now I come into this nuclear sharing, you know, there's in relation to 1 to 10, we have about 200 nuclear weapons here in our region, and 10 times as many, 2,000 Russian missiles targeted to us. So that is so paradox that the poll says, you know, the poll of the European Council on Foreign Relations says the Russians are better, you know, are closer to us than the Americans. If you look to these facts, 2,000 missiles, you know, targeted to us over here in Germany, where's a potential of future battlefield, than Americans, which we need, who are protecting us. And so that is something that is, you know, sometimes you have to remind yourself, the young generation, and sometimes even the group chairman of our coalition partner in the Bundestag, who just recently said publicly that with regard to nuclear sharing, that is a concept we want to withdraw from. We don't need that. We don't want US nuclear weapons on German soil. Of course, nobody really likes weapons in general, and nuclear weapons are, you know, are not good per se. But as I said earlier, I mean, they are protecting us, and the world would be better without weapons. But again, facing reality, the facts lie on the table. And I have a suspicion that, you know, the coalition partner wants to, you know, extend the period of time until Germany really decides for a successor to Tornado. The Tornado combat fighter is a very old system, has been there for decades already, but is capable of, what is it, electronic warfare, which the Eurofighter is not capable of. And, you know, there needs to be a successor system to Tornado. We have 141, I think 141 Eurofighters who are not capable of nuclear sharing, cannot replace the Tornado system. But for example, F-35 or F-18 from the Americans could do that. And the Europeans are in the process of developing, that just started, the FCAS system, you know, but that will take quite a while. So we need to fill the gap now with a system that NATO allies already have. For example, the Brits are not flying Tornado anymore. Italians are also getting rid of Tornado. So Germany really has to make a decision. What do we want? Do we wait? And by that, you know, if you wait after the year 2030 to replace the Tornado, that will cost German taxpayers a lot of money, around 10 billion on the figures that I've heard from the German Defense Ministry. So that has to be taken into account, playing with taxpayers' money, playing also with reliability and credibility within NATO. That is not something that would be my personal concept. and certainly not of the vast majority of my party, the Bundestag. So I'm criticizing the public statements by our coalition partner. By the way, the group chairman, Rolf Mützenich, has been criticized by his own folks, defense experts within his own political party. So, but, you know, sending out these signals to our partners in NATO is something that we should not do. Looking to the time, I will just briefly jump back to China and then turn over to Iran before we then it's open up the Q&A. There's so much to talk about, and I'd love to talk for hours about all these aspects of transatlantic relationship. Again, coming briefly back to China, what I said earlier, we sometimes feel squeezed between the West and the East, whereas it should be quite easy for us to make a basic decision. All the things that I said before: democracy, rule of law, respect for the individual, freedom of speech, human rights, environmental protection, everything that is a no-brainer to say. Of course, we are westbound. It's the Americans who are closest allies in France and will remain to be so. And the Americans will be a superpower past these times, a digital, economic, and military superpower, a strong partner for us. So that should be a no-brainer. But China is important. We do a lot of trade with China, and we want to participate in this growing economy, in this market. And also the other way around, China is, you know, it's building, it's tremendously invested in Europe, elsewhere in the world as well. But they're quite smart. They have a lot of money, and they're actually in the process of implementing several projects of their Belt and Road Initiative. Italy has signed up to that as an EU member state, which is something that I think problematic. But we should not only complain about others. I mean, the Belt and Road Initiative ends in the domestic harbor in the city of Duisburg, which is just 20 minutes away from me in Germany, from my constituency where I live. So they seem to have an attractive model, coming with loans, with direct investments, creating jobs. So that is something that it seems to be attractive. But also there's this 17+1 concept that they're, you know, also using and abusing, I should say, to put a wedge between Europe, not only the European Union, but between Europe, also the other non-EU states in Europe, especially in the center and southeast European countries. So that is something that we should not only observe. The Europeans need to be aware of the fact that they also, with almost 500 million citizens, are a superpower, or could be a superpower, also economically, but only if they speak with one voice, if they do things unanimously, which is because of different strengths of economy, for example, and a very difficult task. So that is really a problem. So sometimes when we point with a finger across the Atlantic, I'm oftentimes much more concerned about the current status of the European Union and where's our future, where is this going with the EU? We need to position ourselves. We in Europe need to make decisions which are important, and we don't have any time, you know, to waste. A remark on Iran, JCPOA. I don't want to get into too much detail there. Just the latest addition is that the German government just recently, I think it was last week, prohibited the Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, whereas legally we could not just, you know, forbid the organization because it is not established under the laws of Germany. But any activities by Hezbollah and its supporters in Germany are prohibited. And before that was made public, raids in several German cities have been conducted, you know, that were aimed at supporters, the apartments and houses of supporters of Hezbollah, and so that they could not just, you know, prepare themselves to put things away so that they really were hit hard. There is this, there was this more or less artificial differentiation until recently, until this prohibition of Hezbollah activities in Germany, between the military wing on the one part and then the political wing on the other part. We are trying to do our share, and we're trying to debate and convince our European partners to also list the Hezbollah as a whole terrorist organization to prohibit them in the EU. Not everybody in the European Union shares this notion. We have especially France. The French President Macron is, for some reasons, they're a bit reluctant to do that, but France is not alone. There are some other European member countries who also take a somewhat reluctant position when it comes to a listing of Hezbollah as a whole. Since 2013, the military wing is listed on a European level, but not as a whole organization. And, having spoken almost 30 minutes, I will make a stop there, because I can go on forever. But I'm so much interested in your questions, remarks, statement, criticism. Let me know. Thank you so much for your patience until now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your remarks and for your insight on the transatlantic relationship and all this various challenges that it faces right now. I guess I can just echo what you said at the beginning, and which is also very close to our heart, that it's more important. It's also very important to look at what binds us together, and what keeps us together, our value-based relationship. And this is obviously something that we at AJC are stressing constantly. Maybe before we take questions from the audience, I would like to circle back to China and 5G. I mean, this 5G, before the pandemic, we had this discussion in Germany about 5G, and we've also seen a split in your own party on the question if China should be able to build our essentially most critical infrastructure in the 21st century. So what is your assessment? How will the corona pandemic, and maybe also China's behavior in terms of handling the virus, information sharing, all this, how will this change maybe the debate about 5G here in Germany?
Thanks for that. 5G is very important. As I see it, as a part of a critical infrastructure. It's a decision that we have to make, political decision here, that is very important for the future of our country. One upfront remark is, we're using Zoom here, which is a technology that I always very frequently use. But on that happy note, what I'm saying now, as been made public earlier, Zoom has about 700 employees in China. So I'm not saying anymore. Hello, everybody who's listening there.
Hello, Beijing.
There are no secrets that I'm revealing here. So on a happy note. China, well, we have, I belonged, and I consider myself still part of the group that took a very critical position towards 5G. Prompted was the public debate here in Germany by U.S. Ambassador Rick Grenell's letter, where this was perceived as a threat. If you allow Huawei and other Chinese companies to build up your 5G infrastructure in Germany, we might have second thoughts about a cooperation between our intelligence services, which would be, I have to admit, very bad if that would stop. So, but without this letter, we understand we have our own security interests here. So what we parliamentarians, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, Norbert Röttgen, who's also from my party, and I myself and some others, were saying, hey, wait a minute, that cannot be, this so important question of how are we managing 5G? Should we just allow anything, or should we be aware of the security issues involved. Should we completely leave this to the government, until the government gives this into the into the process when everything already has been decided to the parliament, or should we claim ownership of this issue at an earliest point in time, which we did? Well, Chancellor is from my party, and she's a great political leader and everything, and she understands the security issues. But we were sitting together many times over the past several months before the pandemic, discussing these issues in small circle, and she was not very fond of the idea to exclude Chinese right from the start. And I would not be I think it would be too banal to just simply say no Chinese are allowed. I think it is much smarter to write down a catalog of criteria where that might result in a de facto exclusion of Huawei and others. So, but we know that there is an obligation by companies like Huawei, according to the Chinese laws, regardless of what they are telling you. I mean, this is on paper, this is in law, that even that they have to deliver, information out of the boundaries of China. So if they say, we are a German GmbH or something, Huawei Germany, for example, say, we are not a Chinese company, we are construed under the German laws, so they have no, it's not mandatory. There is access. We know that for sure. So we should be very critical and skeptical and not be naive, and many other things. I will not go into too many details. So where are we now? It's become a little bit more quiet because obviously, like many other of the issues that we're talking today about, and issues in addition to that, has become more quiet with regard to everything that has to do with 5G. But only recently, that was I think it was the last session of the Foreign Relations Committee, we agreed that there will be yet another public expert hearing, I don't know, before the summer recess or maybe thereafter, on China as a whole, but with one important element of 5G. Because where we are now is that the government now is, we have the feeling that it is postponed a little bit, slowed down, and Parliament, you will get it until we have a European Union harmonized position on that, and then we discuss this, make our decisions here. You will have your share in a saying as a Parliament, as a German Bundestag, but we have a feeling that it takes too long, that we are somehow again excluded of this process. And my position has not changed. We have with Nokia and Ericsson, we have European companies that are actually helping the Chinese to build up, have helped the Chinese to build up 4G network, and are helping 5G network to build up that in China, who are a little bit afraid of losing business if Germany takes a tough stance here. But then again, I mean, they have the technological capabilities. I think they can build up a European 5G infrastructure. By the way, a super example of a good transatlantic cooperation that could be. Why not doing this together with the Americans?
Absolutely, that would be a fantastic idea, especially now. And maybe just as a very quick follow-up question, because you already touched on this. So I mean, it seems to be that there are debates now to, in some sectors of the economy, decouple from China or establish alternative procurement routes for certain goods. Would you say that it's also a task for the elected officials to also explain to the German public that this will cost us money, and but we need to take certain steps to protect our infrastructure and our important, our important infrastructure and sectors of the economy.
Yeah, I mean, you always have to be transparent and honest to your constituents. So I'm not quite sure if Germans are already aware on what I'm going to say now. I'm really serious. I don't think there's a Chinese threat. Only would it be a threat if we allow that to become a threat. It's a, you know, the competition technologically, economically, and also to some extent the competition between systems, political systems, society systems, is legitimate to some extent. What is not legitimate is sometimes the means that are used by that. We see a lot of cooperation, but a lot of coordination between China and Russia currently when it comes to disinformation, fake news, and abuse of, you know, especially in these corona pandemic times. So these very nice poll results, how Germany is perceiving, or Germans are perceiving the Russians, not very sensitive to China. So it's so far away, you know, it's an interesting country, and so on. I think it is also a task for us as people who have some responsibility in politics, but I would also add leaders in the economic world have a responsibility here to explain and to name things that are not going nicely with regard to theft of intellectual property, human rights violation, abuse of multilateral organizations like WTO, for example, or maybe also World Health Organization. You know, there's another thing that we could talk about, or the Uyghurs situation. These are things that needs to be addressed and should not be turned a blind eye on. And it's our responsibility to make that a part of a responsibly led public debate over here in Germany, my country, and to create awareness.
Thank you. So we're now switching the topic. First of all, Tony Meyer, the co-chair of our board, says hi, and he asked, or he writes, "We thank and congratulate Germany for its leadership with respect to its very important and righteous and public action against Hezbollah. His question is, what concrete steps will the German government take, especially during the when it has the European presidency over the next 6 months in advancing this goal, which you have also outlined about banning or listing Hezbollah in its entirety in the European Union as a terrorist organization? Are there any concrete steps you can think of that the German government can take?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Good to somehow know that you're out there. I can't see or hear you. I'm saying hello. That is an important question. As I said earlier, it's this. It's difficult in the European Union because there are different positions towards a general prohibition of Hezbollah. But as of July 1st, as you quite rightly said, Germany is taking over the presidency of the European Council. And as we have done in the past, now with a stronger position being in the lead, I would say we should even speak up more clearly and boldly than in the past to make that a point. You know, we showed this strong leadership now in our own country here that it is possible to make such a decision to go against these terrorists and to prohibit them, confiscate their funds, and and to go against criminal action. That is something that we should address in our presidency on a European level, and try to find a common ground there, just to make it possible to unanimously, and that is always a problem, we have to do that unanimously, to vote on that as all 27 member countries of the European Union. And also, in addition to that, there's the European Union, United Nations Security Council level, where, you know, there's UN resolution, what is it, 1559/1701, where it is, which deals with the, what is it, disarming terrorist attacks, is including Hezbollah. And we want to go on doing our share there as well. So we're not only working with a national level where we just make this step, which is a correct one and maybe even overdue one, and European Union, we will try to bring our strength there into the European Union, try to, you know, strive for this unanimous vote. And on the United Nations level, we're doing our leadership there as well. But as always, we can make our point. We need to have partners. We have to convince those who don't take that as we do. And you know, but that is certainly something that we have on our solid political agenda. That much I can say.
Well, and I guess what is also important that Berlin took this decision. We know that a lot of countries in the European Union always, you know, hit behind Berlin and saying, "Oh, the Germans are not banning Hezbollah, so you know, so why should we do this?" So you know, a lot of countries are not able to do this anymore, which is certainly a very good thing. So we have a lot of heavy hitters today on our call, because the next question is from our other co-chair, Alan Rich. He also says hi, Peter.
Hey, Alan, good to see you.
His question is, what do you suggest that AJC can do, whether in Germany or back in the US, to advance transatlantic German-US relations?
Oh, a lot. I mean, again, I mean, I'm not just saying this for pushing for when I started off saying what a fantastic and really important Atlantic organization you are, and I really, really mean it. Ever since I started working in the Parliament, we have a good relation, and I had so many fantastic meetings and events, and you know, that is something that is really important. So what can we do? So I first say what I think should not be done. I think it would be a wrong lesson learned from this current administration and the current tension that is across the Atlantic. Not everything's bad there. There's so many good things. Again, the wrong lesson learned would be say, you know, we retract from that. Transatlantic is over. It's not only a not only the United States are a failed state, but transatlantic relations are something of the past. That would be idiotic. So that would be completely irresponsible. So on the contrary, the correct lessons learned is intensify the communication. What a wonderful thing we can do. I mean, what we have done what we are currently doing here with a Zoom video meeting, we would probably not have done that before. And actually, that is something you don't have to travel all the time. We're making use of this technology, which will, be available after the current situation, and which I want to personally make use of much more frequently in the future. So an intensified exchange. What I think also is extremely important are at least two things. One thing is, I mentioned many topics on the transatlantic agenda. What I really think is important is coming to terms with transatlantic trade. It would help so much bringing down the trade deficit, and it would help, building bridges, which are there already. But it would, it should be quite easy. I know it is not. It's complex. It's tough, and I'm optimistic, but not unrealistic. But that needs to be done. A trade agreement between European Union and the United States of America would bring so much together. Not only, facts and figures, but people, goods, and services. It would be so beneficial for all of us. One thing. Second thing is, which really is important to me, is that I mentioned earlier, young generation. Try to reach out as much as you can do to, maybe I shouldn't say teach, but to offer to young Germans or also to young Americans, to have platforms. Not just like older guys like me are doing what we're doing now, but try to reach out to young students that they really learn a lot about our past, about the shared history components that we have. The Second World War, everything that is bad, everything bad that is committed to that, but also the good things that came to Germany after this, the support of the American friends, the history, the airlift, the Berlin Wall, that can live in freedom only with the support of the American friends. I mean, it sounds like very retrospect, but it is so important nowadays to understand that, because you need that knowledge, not all the details, but just a little bit of knowledge as a basis for the shaping of the transatlantic future, which I am convinced will remain so important for all of us and shaping the way we will be living in the future. So I think that is very important, reaching out to the young people, that they understand what that is all about, that they don't fall victims to all this fake news that is out there, and that more and more it gets a hold of them.
This is unintentionally a good transition to the next question, because you spoke about fake news, and the next question is from the audience. What do you make of the fact that Germans are so skeptical of the United States, while a lot of them are much more friendlier towards Russia? And would it also be a task for elected officials to again talk about the importance of the transatlantic alliance, the importance of our relationship with the United States, and especially since 70 years the US has been the guarantor for stability and freedom on the continent, and so something has slipped.
Yeah, of course. I mean, one cannot do enough to talk about all this. I mean, we're only 30 years into the German reunification. That's also 75 years after the end of the Second World War. And I recently did a piece with I'm a transatlantic coordinator. I wrote an article for one of the German newspapers together with the coordinator for Russian affairs. So that was an interesting idea and an interesting experience. Not only is he's a nice guy, Dirk Wiese is his name. Not only is he from the SPD, but also he's responsible as a coordinator for Russia. Me being for going to the west or the other direction. But there's this so-called Elbe Day, where in the last days of the Second World War, where U.S. GIs and Russian soldiers met at the River Elbe in eastern Germany back then, and shook hands and freed Germany. So we were reminded of that, but it was an interesting experience because my glasses are to the west, so my perspective is fortunately American and what they did, and so we try to find the right balance between the Russians and the that we can find the right words and then the balance right in this article. Interestingly, but of course the Americans are so much closer to us, and there's a lot of there is so many opportunities where we can and actually we should do more to remember these things. Let me give you one or two examples from my first days, a little bit over 10 and a half years ago here in the German Parliament. It was me as somebody who was not into politics before, into active politics, but I was working through U.S. law firms here in Germany, and I was lateral moved into politics. And when I started here, I was very happy to become a member of the Foreign Relations Committee and also become the main rapporteur for transatlantic relations back then as a completely unexperienced guy. And I was very happy. I wanted that. But the bad thing is nobody else wanted that, because obviously transatlantic relations did not play such a big role in the German parliament a little bit over 10 years ago. And I have to ask myself, has that changed at all 10 years thereafter? I mean, there are not so many speaking out loud about the importance of transatlantic relations. Again, I mean, you have these things that people talk about: how can we get out of NATO? How can we get out of nuclear sharing, and so on, and Ramstein, and the evil drone wars led from German. So all these things, there's just so much negative connotation, which is really something that I can only counter if I speak out loud. I can't, I'm not alone here, but I wish there would be many more parliamentarians doing that. I mean, there are so many members of the U.S. friendship groups here, but you have to look who's active or not. There are some, but could be more.
Okay, so we're almost out of time, but so that's why I'm giving you a super simple question, and you have 1 minute to respond. The question is this moment just another period of transatlantic turbulence, or is something fundamentally changing?
I detect some irony when you said it is a very simple question.
What? No.
So no, I have to admit that there are changes in the transatlantic relations, which we only saw after Donald Trump took office, which I have also to admit is a little bit shameful to us, because many of the things that we're talking now about, a lot of tension in the transatlantic relations, actually have been there before. And why didn't we see that? Why didn't we see the polarization, changes in the society of the United States? Why were we not accepting that it is our own interest that we have to do more for our responsibility when it comes to defense spending? Speaking of the defense investment pledge, we signed, what we have done. I mean, now we have done a lot of things, but everything seems to be done under pressure. And that is something that mustn't be, that shouldn't be. And looking into the future, I'm always optimistic. Again, the United States will remain a digital military and economic superpower. It is a strong partner, has been in the past, will be in the future. And the United States of America are part of a prosperous European future.
Okay. That's almost on point. So thank you very much. You have been very, very generous with your time. Thank you very much for your insights and for your comments on the transatlantic relationship. Thank you very much for your important work and for your friendship to the AJC. And I can assure you that we are with you, and we are your ally here in Berlin and on the other side of the pond. And we will weather these turbulences. And yeah, again, thank you very much, and thank you very much to the audience. Thank you for your interesting questions. We will have more events in the coming weeks. You are all on our email list. You can also take a look at the homepage of our colleagues in the United States, who are also doing a lot of advocacy work. Also check out what our European colleagues are doing almost every day. And by that, please everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and hopefully we'll meet again, Peter, in the not so distant future in person and not through technology.
Good. Thank you so much, Remco, Tony, Ellen, everybody who's listening and watching. Thanks so much, and keep up the important work that you're doing. Thanks a lot.
We will. Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.